Amazing. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. So many of you. It's so cool. So I guess to kick off, I have amazing panelists here. My name is Sam Saban. I'm at Axios. And I would love it if Jeff and Anna would maybe spend a minute max, which I know is difficult, telling us a little bit about you and your company.
Yeah, so Jeff Schreiner, CEO of 1Password and big-time Tractor fan. So what's 1Password? 1Password's mission is really to safeguard people's most important information, be it at work or at home or anywhere in between. We take a human-centric approach to that, and by that we mean we really try and build our tools to make it easy for people to stay secure.
Totally. Anna?
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Anna Sainsbury. I am the co-founder and CEO of GeoComply. And our business is a little bit centered around a Backstreet Boys song. Who you are and where you are is the essence of our business. And so we are out here to fight a $10.5 trillion cybercrime problem, helping operators and regulators identify who is online so that they can make an impact on fraud.
Amazing. I always love a throwback to the Backstreet Boys, so if we want to keep it going, we totally can. So we're here today mostly to talk about fraud. It's everywhere, it's expansive, an ever-growing problem. Both of you deal with it in similar and also slightly different ways. So what is your read on the threat landscape? What is happening? How are scammers getting better at scamming? And also, where do your companies kind of fit into this?
Yeah, so if I think of it from a 2022 breaches and the 2023 breaches, one of the most common themes around fraud is phishing.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing that, we ran a phishing report and it said 2/3 of the people have been phished in the last year. And that was the people saying that. And what worries me about that is I suspect it's much higher and the rest of the people weren't even aware that they were being phished. More and more, the sophistication is increasing, and we need to provide tools that not only can make it more difficult for people to avoid being phished, but actually to take away the reward that the phishers are going after, which is really trying to get your credentials.
Totally. And of course, when we're talking phishing, we're talking about all those pesky emails you get that clearly look like they're from scammers, but sometimes they're offering an amazing deal and people are tired, they click on the link, and that's what happens. So, Anna?
Yeah, from where we sit, we can see fines in 2022 were up 50%. We also have seen, I'm sure many of you have seen, that there's been a few fines at a value of $50 million. And I think that indicates that regulators are extremely concerned and frustrated with their ability to have an impact on fraud. The other conversation we're tackling at the moment is consumer frustration, where there's a huge conversation about privacy and how many people have concerns about sharing their data online, which I think a lot of us are constantly seeing articles about data being leaked, so much so now that 80% of Americans' personally identifiable information is on the internet, that this is a large issue for us to tackle, and it really demands regulators to get their hands involved and for us as a society to decide how much we want to share our information in order to receive better results at stopping fraud.
Totally. And I think something that's super interesting and maybe as a through line here is we're talking about a topic that everyone kind of knows about, but maybe we don't really consciously think about it or we view it as like a nuisance, right? Like, oh my God, why do I have to put in this like multi-factor authentication code or set up my password manager or worry about regulators? I'm curious, what are some of the misconceptions that you hear when you're working with consumers or thinking through the regulatory aspect when it comes to just understanding fraud and identity theft and just how frankly easy it is to kind of fall into this?
Yeah, I think the thing that people misunderstand is that there are simple things that they can do to help protect themselves and prevent themselves from either being breached or in at least the cases where they have been caught in a breach, to try and mitigate that data. Certainly things like strong unique passwords play a role, as you say, two-factor, but one of the big things that we need to do is we need to start taking away what the attackers are going after. So in the case of credentials, so I actually received a text message from the Canadian government. Of course, it wasn't really, sitting there and saying that they've got a refund for me for my taxes, and if I would just log on to this site and provide my bank information, that they would actually give me my money back. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to get my banking credentials. And so that's where things like passkeys come into play, the new technologies where instead of having a password or having a credential, there's a key that's been generated for you that is meaningless if it gets out in the hands of the hackers, but still allows you to complete the information that you're trying to provide.
Totally.
I mean, I think I'm one of the many people that are so thankful that 1Password exists, because I myself have a real problem. I create these amazing passwords that my CISO loves, and then I forget them almost immediately. So discovering that technologies like 1Password exist to be able to help us to have good, solid passwords, but also a plan and an ability to remember them, I think is extremely important. The next is, you're right. I think when people have like their credit card stolen, you immediately think about your own inconvenience, and you're calling up the credit card provider and you're like, send me another card. We're not thinking about, well, who stole my credit card? And what are they doing with that money? And how much money have they had their hands on? And why is this such an ongoing problem that we haven't been able to tackle? I also got that kind text message offering me some money from the CRA, and I thought, finally. But the reality is, these schemes, even though fraudsters are consistently innovating, and the conversation in cybercrime is a long game of cat and mouse, and who has the best innovations to either create new fraud or to stop it, it's an ongoing challenge, and I think it requires a lot of people to work together. And for regulators, the biggest challenge is that you can't just put out a new requirement and that's actually going to solve the problem. You have to change those requirements almost daily and weekly. This is a fast-paced game in order to stay on top of it. And so if we want to make meaningful change to have better outcomes, we're going to need to stay on our toes.
Totally. Well, what does that look like, right? When we're dealing with a threat landscape where scammers are constantly evolving, people maybe are not as educated or aware about the ways that their data is being manipulated, used, sold, resold, et cetera. I'm curious from the perspective of your companies, how you kind of stay on top of that, how that impacts your business decisions and what products you roll out and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that gives me a lot of comfort is cybersecurity is a big field for innovation, and you've got companies like ours that are spending a lot of time and a lot of focus on what are the upcoming threats. Obviously there's a ton of information about AI at this conference, and we're really looking at it from a standpoint of, we can try and educate people on how to have safer behaviors, and we should. But what's more important is that we actually provide tools that can help them, because as the sophistication of fraud increases, it's more difficult for humans just to sit there and avoid it or understand when they're being phished or when they're being attacked. So the tools that we build, that we innovate, and that you see here in conferences like today are critical, because they will give the people the ability to protect themselves against the threats that themselves are growing in sophistication.
Totally.
So I spent a lot of time thinking about how can you actually build consumer trust? And we work in a lot of innovative marketplaces. So sometimes innovative marketplaces means that regulators aren't even looking at these spaces yet, right? And we've seen this come up through crypto, which is a bunch of people that wanted something different than banking and created something that appealed to them. And it takes a while sometimes for regulators to catch up. What we look at is, how is a consumer supposed to be able to decipher a good website from a bad one? And often what we find as regulators come in and license and regulate certain brands, but you go on Google and you Google a service, and any brand shows up. And some brands aren't licensed, some aren't regulated, but they're still on page 1 of Google because they have their SEO in order. And I think that this is where we just need to be a bit more cohesive to help educate consumers on what to look for, what does good regulation look like, because that's where, a site that is highly regulated is probably going to ask for more details about who you are, especially if you're applying for a bank account or setting up a credit card or applying for a loan, which many people want to do online. A good site will need to collect a lot of information, and there needs to be more education from the government and also from each province or jurisdiction that you're in what does a regulated site look like and what are they doing to protect you.
Totally. And Anna, I guess just to make sure not everyone maybe is as in the weeds with the regulatory aspect as maybe you and I. When you're talking about this, is it mostly data privacy regulations, breach notifications? What kind of regulations are you kind of referring to here?
So data privacy is definitely a consideration, but for a lot of the highly regulated markets, we're looking at money laundering. And that ultimately comes down to like simple good practices, like making sure you're not doing business with sanctioned jurisdictions. One of the crimes that we see a lot, which is something that came out of the war on Ukraine, is that so many Russians are manipulating content, buying your identity online for $10 and able to open up accounts and abuse the system with your credentials. And so this is something that we spend a lot of time, these unknown or these unforeseen, unpredictable events that have a huge impact on consumers' security and privacy.
Totally. And this might be switching gears slightly, but I think it was Jeff who already brought up artificial intelligence, as I'm sure is the buzzword for the entire week here in Toronto. How is AI changing the game? I feel like there's so much hype around how ChatGPT will make it easier for a phishing email to look believable. These things will be so much faster to do. How much of this is hype? How much of it is real? And what is the actual impact that you think AI is going to have on this?
Yeah, I think a fair amount of it is real.
Yeah.
Obviously, there is hype out there, a lot of hype out there about AI, but the part that I think is real is today, if we look at the typical phishing attack, it's a very splatter paint phishing attack. It's going to send out the same message to hundreds of thousands or millions of people and hope that a few of them fall for it. Whereas with AI, I think it can be a lot more pointed, a lot more targeted against specific people so that the message you get will be different than the message that I get, or it will come from somebody who, appear to come from somebody who you trust. I think the other thing with AI that is challenging, and this goes to your point about identity and being out there, and that is with Google today, if we Google a business or a person, you get a set of links. And as a human, you can choose the link. Do I click on the link for their business? Do I click on a link for a review? Do I click on a link for a negative story about that business? But with AI, you often get an opinion stated as fact, but an opinion as a result of that. You don't really get to see the inside information that attributed to that opinion. And as such, I think it's a lot more important that we all understand what of our information is out there, what of our information is being used, where is it collected, where is it being, ultimately put into these models and forming an opinions which of the, will have decisions made against them.
Yeah, totally. And I don't know if you have any thoughts as well.
AI is obviously a buzzword. I think last year's was machine learning. And I think people like to mention Elon Musk when they're also talking about anything new age. So I think the thing that we look at is actually being overly concerned about things that are too future forward. It doesn't really help tackle the problems today. And there's some low-hanging fruit that each consumer can do to protect their identity and to protect themselves from fraudsters. And a lot of these attacks aren't actually as sophisticated as you would think. Like, we can still use simple mechanisms to see if a bot is using a computer or if it's a real human. There's always small indicators that are there that can help you if you're just collecting them from a device to really authenticate if that's a user on the other side of the phone. So I think sometimes, the media comes out there and they get us worrying about something that's down the road, but we have some fraud right in front of us that we can tackle. And cybersecurity, it's going to be a long game. It's always going to be with us. Like wherever there is some type of economy, there's always going to be someone that wants to abuse it. And so we just have to be prepared and know that this is the game we're in, and that we have to make sure that there's a good balance between what information we're asking people to put online so that we can authenticate them, and that we're able to build trust with the right brands. And I think that that's one of the challenges we should probably focus on.
Yeah, totally. No, I think I hear it often, right, that cyber criminals, scammers, whoever else are just opportunistic, right? The idea is if something's going to take more time, they're probably not going to go through with it and pursue that avenue and just keep doing what they're doing until it doesn't work anymore. And so I think that makes so much sense. I guess we've been talking a lot about the potentially scary parts of this and worrying people. I'm curious, what kind of gives you hope in your field, if there's anything around, just adoption of certain products, or if AI can actually be a net positive, or anything like that that's kind of giving you hope today.
I think what gives me the most hope is that there's just an army of people out there in the cybersecurity field who are working towards this, building things like passkeys that will replace passwords, and eventually I think those sort of ideas will move beyond passwords into a lot of the information where we can provide a token instead of the actual information and keep our information secure.
Totally.
Yeah, I see the same progress. One is that cybersecurity is a market that investors are interested in, and obviously the more money that's being funneled into the space, then the more money there is to spend on research and development. The next major hurdle that I think we overcame is this fear that trust is decreased when sometimes user friction is integrated. And I feel like we've made the movement ahead for multi-factor authentication, which I think is a really great move. And consumers are used to it. And so it's not seen as such a big hurdle. And now that some trust is built, I think consumers are going to start wanting to see, like, what are you doing to protect me? These are the types of brands that I want to work with, and that you're having a good understanding about what integrity looks like from a brand that's holding your personally identifiable information.
Totally. And then we have a few seconds left. Is there one tip that you have for the audience that they can maybe be doing today? I have a feeling I know what Jeff's might be doing today to help protect your identity and stay safe online.
Strong, unique passwords.
There it is.
Yeah, I would agree. It's key. And making sure that you do your due diligence on a business before you give it any of your personal information.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. We're out of time. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Thank you.
Awesome.